The American frontier, or the Wild West, was an era that captivated the imagination with its stories of rugged pioneers, outlaws, lawmen, and a constant struggle for survival. However, beyond the romanticized tales of gunslingers and gold rushes, the Old West was a violent and dangerous place, where life often hung in the balance. From duels to lawless hangings, the brutality of frontier justice and the savage conditions of the land led to many notable and grisly deaths. We'll explore the top 10 brutal and historic deaths that left a lasting mark on the legacy of the American frontier. Jesse James. Jesse James was one of the most famous outlaws in American history, known for robbing banks and trains with his gang. His death in 1882 was as dramatic as his life. James was shot in the back of the head by Robert Ford, one of his own gang members, in exchange for a reward. Ford killed James while he was unarmed, adjusting a picture on the wall of his home. The betrayal shocked the nation, and Ford was forever labeled as a coward. Jesse James' death symbolized the violent and treacherous life of an outlaw in the Wild West. Wild Bill Hickok. A legendary figure of the Wild West, James Butler, Wild Bill Hickok was a soldier, lawman, and gambler. His death in 1876 during a poker game in Deadwood, South Dakota, is one of the most famous in frontier history. Hickok was holding a pair of aces and eights, now known as the dead man's hand, when Jack McCall shot him in the back of the head. Hickok's sudden and brutal murder, in broad daylight and in a crowded saloon, stunned the West and added to his legend as a gunslinger. Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid, also known as Henry McCarty or William Bonney, was a notorious outlaw who claimed to have killed 21 men. He was killed in 1881 by Sheriff Pat Garrett in a darkened room in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. The Kid had escaped capture multiple times, earning a reputation as a slippery and elusive figure. His death at the age of 21 marked the end of a brief but violent career, and he remains a legendary figure of the Wild West. The gunfight at the OK Corral. Death in Tombstone. The gunfight at the OK Corral in 1881 is perhaps the most famous shootout in Wild West history. It involved lawman Virgil, Wyatt, and Morgan Earp, along with Doc Holliday, facing off against the Clanton McGlory gang in Tombstone, Arizona. In just 30 seconds, 3 men were killed: Billy Clanton and Tom and Frank McGlory. Though brief, the gunfight became legendary, symbolizing the rough justice of the Old West. The deaths at the OK Corral remain etched in American lore as one of the most iconic moments of frontier violence. George Armstrong Custer. One of the most brutal and significant deaths in American frontier history occurred at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and over 200 of his men were killed by a coalition of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Custer's death, along with his entire command, was part of a larger conflict between Native American tribes defending their land and the encroaching U.S. Army. The battle, also known as Custer's Last Stand, became a symbol of the devastating consequences of the Indian Wars. The American frontier was a land where justice was often swift and brutal, and life was constantly under threat. From infamous outlaws like Jesse James and Billy the Kid to lawmen like Wild Bill Hickok, the Wild West was defined by violent deaths that captured the imagination of generations to come. These 10 brutal and historic deaths offer a glimpse into the harsh realities of the frontier, where survival often depended on the ability to wield a gun and face death with courage, or at least a fast draw. The legacy of these figures and their violent ends continues to shape the mythology of the American West, a place where life was cheap and death was always close at hand.